Wait. Wow. Thank you for coming to Bimmy tonight. This is always an exciting time for us when Jon Dodd comes to speak because it's a subject that's near and dear to all of us, certainly. And we love to hear the update on what's happening with sharks around Block Island. Welcome again to Bimmy. Our mission is to inspire appreciation and preservation of the wonderful saltwater environment around Block Island through our educational programs and our hands-on exploration. We do want to thank Deadeye Dix for once again providing a very wonderful pre-talk dinner for our tonight's speaker and a few of us hangers-on. I know when to show up for things. Anyway, I'm forgetting a whole bunch, but I don't really care because we need to move on and hear about the research that's being done around Block Island and up and down the East Coast, but specifically here, we're very thankful to the Atlantic Shark Institute and our involvement with them and their help with us. So please welcome Jon Dodd.
Thank you for that eloquent introduction. Really appreciate that. Clearly worked on that for a little while. Next year, he's going to skewer me if I'm invited back. So this is my third year coming to Bimmy to talk about sharks and what's going on around Block Island. So yeah, so we're going to move along. It's really exciting. You know, what's going on around Block Island and sharks in particular is near and dear to my heart. I'm a Rhode Islander. I grew up in Rhode Island, marine biologist, University of Rhode Island. But you know, there's a lot going on in these oceans that give us cause for concern, pause. When you hear about sharks, it's actually a good thing, contrary to what some of us believe, because they're really critical to a healthy ocean environment. They're critical to balance. And when you see these warming water temperatures like we have down in Florida right now, really disconcerting. 90s, they had a couple of days they hit over 100 degrees in water temperature. And when you think about that, you know, you get into a hot tub at 101, 100, I have trouble getting in it. And these fish are down there and these corals and everything else are trying to live in it. They can't. So we got a lot going on. It makes sharks really important as apex predators. And we're going to talk a lot about that. So let's get rolling. So here's our goals for today. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Atlantic Shark Institute. We're based in South Kingstown. Share what we know about the Rhode Island white sharks going on here and the growing seal colony. We're going to reveal some patterns in the white shark movements. We're going to review our tagging technology, how we track these sharks, what we're doing to track them. We're going to discuss the impacts of the growing seal population here at the North Light. And then we're going to talk about what's next and what the future might hold. So the ASI, we're a nonprofit. We're an all-volunteer organization. So we have about 40 people involved in the Atlantic Shark Institute, and they're all valuable. I don't get paid. Nobody gets paid. This is all about if we get $10, it goes into the research. If we get $1,000, it goes into the research. So we have we're entirely focused on unanswered and emerging questions, right? Because if someone said, hey, can we figure out if there are sharks around Block Island? We already know that. We don't want to spend any time or money or effort to determine that, right? We want to move the needle. We want to figure out and we want to answer questions that have a lot to do with survival, sustainability, and the future of sharks. So we are the principal investigator, meaning we run a number of studies. We're also co-PIs, meaning we share the responsibility of running studies. And we're also collaborators. So we might do tagging efforts on behalf of other folks that can't get to New England or get to our waters if they are projects that we believe in. So we also rely on our resident research scientist, Dr. Josh Moyer. Josh is over at Yale. He's a lecturer. He's my resident research scientist, brilliant young man. We talk every day. We also have a research advisory board, which is filled with some of the smartest shark people you'll ever see. I was just bumped into someone who picked up Greg Scoble's book, Chasing Shadows, out in Cape Cod. Greg's on the board and a number of other folks, because when we want to do something, right, we want to find out if someone else is doing it and can we collaborate, or are we going to move the needle? So you have to have a large group of people that has their finger on the pulse of what everyone else is doing in this industry. And can everybody hear me well? Are we good? Good. Okay. That's me. Marine biologist, tagged my first shark in the 80s. I've caught, tagged, and released more than 1,000 sharks. Kicked off at the Fisheries, National Marine Fisheries Service down in Narragansett. And if anybody saw Shark Week this year, you probably saw me, or SharkFest. I was on that as well. That's Nat Geo. And I'm a member of the Explorers Club in New York City, which unfortunately, if you saw the disaster there at the Titanic, a couple of those folks were members of the Explorers Club, which is a club of folks that, hopefully do good things and find themselves in places, learning things and sharing things that are important to the rest of us. So here's why this work is so important. So we like to say shark health is ocean health and ocean health is our health. So every species of shark is not in trouble, but many are. Many are. If anybody has been fishing around Block Island in New England, smooth dogfish sharks can be a nuisance. So every shark is not in trouble, but the ones we focus on are. More than 100 million sharks are killed every year, many for their fins. Just not sustainable. We're going to talk a lot about that. There's still a lot of things we don't know about sharks to manage them appropriately. And of course, sharks are apex predators, right? So when you think about the food chain and you think about the top of that chain, and you've got, I'm going to way oversimplify this, but you've got 10 sharks at the top, you've got 100 predators right beneath them, you've got 1,000 beneath them, you got 10,000. When you pull sharks out of the top, that second tier predator, where there should be 100 in that scenario, now there's 1,000, they eat everything underneath it. And suddenly everyone says, wait a second, what's going on? Why do we suddenly have no more of this, no more of that? Well, because the sharks are gone and we've turned the entire food chain upside down. And that's why there's a bunch of examples, which I'll give you one. I have my timer right here. So George is going to keep me on time, but I'll give you one example. So we've seen studies where a bad storm will come in and it will destroy an area. And one of the things that happens often is the weed, the seaweed, the kelps, the grasses, they get upended. And of course, they trap carbon and they allow small creatures to live and survive. Well, we need that to grow back as quickly as possible. When sharks are present, it actually comes back pretty quickly because the sharks are the ones that eat the grazers, the ones that eat as soon as a little sprout comes out of the sand to start to restore that grass, these little buggers are down there and they feed on them. If you have a healthy shark population, they're always looking over their shoulder, and that kelp forest, that seaweed will come back relatively quickly. When there are no sharks, it takes a long, long time because if there aren't predators to keep all those grazers at bay, they say, what the heck is going on? Why won't it return and why is it taking so long? Small example, there are hundreds of them with sharks. So who assists the Atlantic Shark Institute? Well, first of all, private boat owners. We call them research volunteers. We cannot get enough of these people. They are people that will take our researchers out. A lot of these researchers are young. They're trying to make a name for themselves. And getting out on a boat for a day is about $2,000 if you want to go hire a charter. So we have people that own boats that say, well, wait a minute, I own a boat. I'd love to learn a little bit about what they're doing. Take them out for a day. We buy all the chum, we buy the bait, we buy all the elements. So it's a way for you to give back, to help with the research, and also get involved a little bit. Charter boat operators are out every day. So we have a bunch of taggers there. Commercial boats, draggers. This is one of them. The Estrella Del Mar down there. Key for us because they drag all day. They catch sharks. They catch all sorts of things that aren't part of their target. If they catch a white shark, we want it tagged. If they catch a thresher shark, we want it tagged. So recreational fishermen, fish trap operators. We got a couple of white sharks again by the fish traps by Galilee. The white sharks sense it. They go to the trap. They get caught. They pull it out. They tag for me. They know exactly what to do. We get a tag in it and send it on its way. Land personnel. Here at Block Island, main guy for that is Jules Cranock, and we're going to talk about that group. But we need people on land to help work through these programs and the projects and studies that we have. And Rhode Island DEM is our critical partner. We can't touch some of these sharks without their approval, like the white shark. So without them giving us approval, we can't do it. So they are our main partner in most of this research. So here are the different species we study. So we study the white shark. It's really a white shark. We all call it a great white shark, but that's okay. The mako shark, the blue, the common thresher, the porbeagle, and a couple of newbies, the blacktip and the spinner sharks, new additions to our area. According to the IUCN, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, every one of these populations of sharks is declining. Every one of them. Mako shark is now endangered worldwide. And you're going to see why in a minute. Takes a mako shark, a female mako shark has to be about 21 years old before she will reproduce. 21. So you can imagine how long it would take if a mako shark, a female mako shark was born 10 minutes ago when we kicked this discussion off, 21 years from now, she can reproduce. I'm 61, I'll be 82. They don't have a lot of young. And these oceans are not all that kind because there are millions and millions of hooks, longliners, commercial operations, recreational fishermen, and more. So it's really miraculous. And by the way, that shark's over 600 pounds. If I go and speak to a group of fishermen and I say, show of hands, how many people here have caught a mako shark over 600 pounds? No one puts their hand up. So not one of those sharks reproduced if they're all females. Not a hard problem to see when you start digging into it because they weren't designed to be taken out in these large numbers. And the black tips and spinners, anybody's been down to Florida, you hear a lot about them. We have them in growing numbers here. We tagged 3 last week, 3 spinner sharks. Both of those sharks are in the top 10 for attacks worldwide. They love to be along the shore. They love warm water. And we're seeing as our waters warm, we're seeing more species come into the waters, and we're seeing more species into a smaller geographic space, which is going to create some problems, which we'll talk about. Yeah, it's a great question. So the question is, are they on here because they're endangered? Not necessarily. So we have partners that do a lot of work with hammerhead sharks down in Florida and those surrounding areas. And because of what they're doing, we can assist them, but we don't focus on it because there's too few of them here. Now, we saw one yesterday, a hammerhead. So they're not totally uncommon here, but they're not here in the numbers that we would be able to derive enough value in putting them on our project list. Good question. So here's our buddy, the great white shark. That's a picture I took. I was in a cage in Mexico. So here's our great white. So that top picture on the right, that was a white shark we caught in a fish trap right over in Galilee. We tagged that shark and let it go. So here's our stats on our buddy, the white shark, up to 21 feet long, more than 4,000 pounds, can live to 70 years old or more. Look at this one. Males reach sexual maturity at 26, females at 33. So if you look at the bottom, we have protected since 1997. So if you do the math, 26 years. And we're starting to see a few more white sharks. So you can see this is a long-term play. If we hit these sharks too hard, this is not a, hey, let's not catch them for a year or two and the numbers will come right back. It doesn't happen. Can't happen. Look how large a male is before it reaches sexual maturity, 14, 12 and a half. Look at the females, almost 15 feet long at 33 years old before she can reproduce. And look at 2 to 14 pups, so very few young, gestation period. So these are all important. We work primarily with the young of the year and the juvenile. Young of the year are the newborns and the juvenile white sharks, which we have. We've just tagged our 25th white shark last week, which we're really excited about because they're disproportionately important based on their age and their size. They're the future of the species, obviously. So, important note, local density does not always translate to regional or global health. So we've all heard about what's going on at Cape Cod, right? A lot of white sharks at Cape Cod, a lot of seals. The white shark is back. Well, not according to the IUCN. Globally, they're vulnerable. You can look, if you look to the right, the next step is they're endangered worldwide. In the Mediterranean, critically endangered. Europe, critically endangered. So again, we have to be careful because when we look at a population, it can be in a very small geographic area. And we know, of course, these white sharks are all up in Cape Cod because there are over 50,000 gray seals. And those seals have two options. They can sit on the beach and starve to death, or they can run the gauntlet to go feed. And these white sharks have figured that out. And that's why if Greg Scommel, he just put out his study, and of course I've seen the data, which is fascinating. They go up and down those Cape Cod beaches all day long, waiting for somebody to make a mistake. And with over 50,000 seals, they do. So what's going on in the Cape? And then we'll get to what's going on here. So Marine Mammal Protection Act in 1972, the gray seals at that point were close to extinction. Now there's more than 50,000. And you may remember this, maybe not, but 2004, there was a white shark in a pond by Woods Hole, a 13-footer, 1,700 pounds. They called Greg Scommel. Greg and I went to University of Rhode Island together. He was 1 year ahead of me. And he was amazed, and we talked, and it was like, this is unbelievable. There's a great white here. And he just put out his study, brand new book. The estimate is there are 800 different great whites in Cape Cod. We were amazed in 2004. And it's likely the largest aggregation worldwide. Now, a lot of math in this paper, right? So it can be as few as close to 400, as many as close to 1,200, but significant number. Good news is that right now around Block Island, we don't have any resident subadult or adult white sharks. We'll talk a little bit about juveniles and a little bit about young of the year in a minute. But they run all up and down that beach all day long. And we were talking at dinner, and yeah, you can take a boat there periodically and you think they're rocks or a break wall, and they go on forever and ever. Pretty wild. All right, so let's talk about what we're doing here. That is me, and that is a really large great white shark that we tagged in off of Hilton Head. And that was about a 16-footer, really large. We think it was close to 3,000 pounds. And we've been tracking it ever since. And this is one of my favorite pictures. This is Jameson. So that's Greg Scommel. If you can see that far, apologies to those in the back. He's got his hands on a rope. We've got the rope tied around a great white. That's me standing up in the boat. That is the harbor master. So we were doing some research and we got a call and somebody said, hey, there's a great white shark. It beached itself. So we took the boat we were in, we drove it into the beach. Greg and I got off, we ran down the beach, and there is this white shark. And everyone's throwing water on it and so forth. We get it into the water. So Greg and I stood there for a little bit and we said, this shark does not look like it's going to make it. So we said, let's tie it to the Boston whaler. And we're going to drive it around for a while. We're going to force water through its gills. And we're going to see if we can't revive this shark. So we did that for 45 minutes, trying to get it. First of all, it was inside of Chatham Inlet. And suddenly we stopped and the shark just sank. So we said, we don't know what we're going to do here. And we were talking about a necropsy, and suddenly the shark kicked to life. This is now the shark swimming away from us, but we had to keep him tied up because we were afraid if we let him go, then everyone would say, what did you just do? You just let a great white go inside. So this is the shark swimming away. And this is Wayne Davis's picture. He's from Rhode Island. He's a pilot. And we got him outside. We untied Jameson. Harbor Master's grandson's name is Jameson, and he likes Jameson. And Jameson has visited the Cape every year since. So keeps coming back. We get him, he trips every single time. So a fun story. So let's talk a little bit about our tagging technologies. So we're talking a little bit about this at dinner again, and I liken this very much to, it's like a NASCAR pit stop, right? So here's what happens. When we go off to a day to do shark research or shark, we're trying to fish, you don't always know what you're going to catch. You just don't. That's the reality. You think you know. We know what water temperatures these sharks prefer. We know locations. We know what the ground is like, topography. We know what the bait might be. We know what this, the moon phase might be. We know what the tide is. And we say, we're going to catch mako shark right here today. And of course, we start fighting, and here comes a thresher. So for us, we have to have a variety of tags because we don't treat every shark the same. We can't, because these tagging technologies can be very expensive, very expensive. So I'm going to describe very quickly what how these work and the ways that we'll deploy them. So for example, way at the bottom of the list is this little tag. This is free for the National Marine Fisheries Service. This is just a little plastic tag. It's got a number on the capsule, and it's got a little card that accompanies it. The number on the capsule is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The number on the card is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We all go fishing today. We catch a 6-foot male blue shark. We know a lot about those sharks. So we'll spend 10 cents and we'll put this tag into the shark. Shark is going to swim away. We're going to take that card. We're going to mail it into the National Marine Fisheries Service, and we're all going to fill it out. We're going to say, hey, guess what we did? We caught a 6-foot blue shark today at this location. It was in this condition, and we let it go. 5 years from now, somebody catches that shark, and they say, hey, I caught this off Florida. And we said it was 6 feet long. Now they say it's 7 feet long. Oh, so it grew a foot in 5 years. And it went from point A to point B. Problem is, we don't know what it did in between, right? Those 5 years. Still very valuable. More than 200,000 of these tags have been deployed, the most popular tagging program ever produced. And these are produced and distributed through the National Marine Fisheries Service at the lab in Narragansett. So everybody's going to get one of these. Everybody. If we want to step it up a little bit, this is an acoustic tag. This tag is $425, and we're putting this in all of the great whites that we're catching in Rhode Island. So if you've seen our receiver, if anybody has had a chance to see one of our receivers driving around in a boat around Block Island or anywhere in Rhode Island, they look like this. So there are some people going, hey, wait a second, I've seen one of those. If you took the ferry over, you would have seen one by the center wall. Yeah, you can also see one not far from the North Light. If you went down to the Southeast Light today, my wife and I was standing there and I said, oh, there's one of our receivers there. So here's your receiver. Okay. So that acoustic tag is like a social security number. There's only one number to one tag. When we put this in a shark, we can now track this shark. This will last for 10 years. Every time a shark comes within 600 yards of this, it'll definitely register it all the way out to 1,500 yards. So what's great about having these tags is we can follow those sharks for 10 migrations, wherever they go. We now have 17 acoustic receivers in Rhode Island, and our partner, Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management, has 20-something. So we now have 40 some odd receivers so we can track everything going on in our waters. If we want to step it up further, this is a spot tag. This is a tag that we will apply to a dorsal fin of a shark. The value in this is that we don't need this shark to go near an acoustic receiver. So if you imagine we just put that acoustic tag on a shark, and now that shark swims into the middle of the Atlantic. We will not detect that shark because we don't have receivers where it's 7,000 and 8,000 feet deep. This tag solves that problem. This tag, that little antenna goes up to the Argos satellite system, bounces off and tells us exactly where the shark is every time it breaks the surface. About $2,000 for this tag. So we can put this tag in an acoustic tag on a shark, and we can tell where it is every time it's under the water and gets near a receiver, and above the water where it trips the satellite. And finally, we've got the granddaddy here. This tag is about $4,000. And this tag we can put into a shark, and it'll tell us everywhere that shark went for up to a couple of years, water depth, water temperature, everything. And when this tag pops off, which we program it to do, it floats to the surface, and it uses the same Argo satellite system. We'll go up to the satellite and we will start getting data on everywhere that shark went and everything that shark did. We are not putting $4,000 into a 6-foot blue shark, which is why I go back to it's a little bit like a NASCAR pit stop, because depending upon what we're doing, we have to know what we're going to deploy. Everybody's not created equal. So if we catch a white shark, we're going to spend a few dollars. If we catch a blue shark that's male, virtually nothing. If we catch a blue shark that's female, only 1 in 25 blue sharks we catch are females. We're going to spend a few dollars on the females. So that's what's interesting about having this grouping here. And that's why until we can identify that shark species and that shark sex, we don't know exactly what we're going to do yet, which is why we need to be ready to do all of these things and move as quickly as we can. Make sense? And then this tag is a novel tag we've been experimenting with for a couple of 3 years now. This is a uterine tag. So this tag, if we catch a shark and it is pregnant, and we give it an ultrasound, just like you'd see in a doctor's office, only they're waterproof, and we determine the shark is pregnant, and it is a shark that we have great interest in and great value, we will put 2 of these in the shark, in each uterus. And when the shark gives birth, this will pop out with the pups. This will float to the surface and tell us exactly where mama gave birth. That's really important for a few reasons. Yeah. Yeah, so the question is, how do the partnerships play into what tags get applied? I'll give you a perfect example. So we have a partner down at Florida Atlantic University, Dr. Stephen Kajera. He's probably the best blacktip shark guy in the country. He shipped me 6 tags that he wants me to deploy into blacktip sharks. Doesn't care what sex they are. And they are not the $4,000 one PSAT, but it's this variation. It's $2,000 a tag. Because these sharks are new to New England, and this is their northernmost range, he's trying to figure out how long they spend up here, and if they're the same sharks that go all the way to Florida, or do they go halfway down and overwinter in the Carolinas, et cetera. So he doesn't want to have to tag them in Florida because he doesn't know if they're going to, but we know the ones that are here came all the way. We'll deploy these on his behalf. Then when he writes a paper, we are a collaborator on that paper. So we have to decide if we want to spend the time to find these sharks, put tags in them, and do we think this study has enough value to spend that time, effort, and money? So for us, it's less about money for the tag, but to go out every single day in a boat trying to find them. So with the uterine tag, I was just on a show like a few weeks ago on National Geographic, and it was about 2 porbeagle sharks that were both pregnant that we tagged in Massachusetts, and they went down to Bermuda, and both of them got attacked down there, killed, and there was a mystery about who did it. But we had those tags in both of those sharks, those uterine tags. And unfortunately, neither one of those deployed because they didn't get back to give birth. So there's your example of tagging technologies and why they're important. I'm going to try to sneak over here and not fall down. This is what we use. This is a tagging stick. And basically, we've got a pin at the end of it. Those tags slide over the top of this pin. Let me show you how you do it. I'm going to put the microphone down, all right? And this, by the way, is the acoustic receiver itself. So this is the receiver that absorbs all of those detections. So it's about $2,300 per receiver. We put a battery in it every single year, and we deploy these. And this is where all the value is. The buoy keeps it in place. The receiver detects and records the data. And then we'll go out and we'll download this data twice a season. Yes. Yeah, great question. How do we implant the uterine tags? So that tag has a pole that we use, and it's got a release trigger on the back. So if you could imagine it, you've got this wire. The wire is buried inside of a pole. It's very small, and we've got a little trigger handle at the end of it. So once we get it into the uterus where we know where we want it to be, we squeeze the end of the handle, much like a handle on a hose, like a water handle, and you'll hear it click, and that means it's been released where we need it to do. Then we pull it back out, and we know where we've got it. We can do it either at the side of the boat, or we can do it when a shark is on the boat, because we'll bring the shark on the boat, we'll put a hose down its throat, we'll put a towel over its eyes to calm it down, we'll do the ultrasound, and then we can do it right on the boat deck. Turn the shark around, slide the shark back out. It takes a few people to do that. And it can get a little kooky. Yeah. So what's the average time we can have a shark out of the water and it's still okay? We like to draw the line at 10 minutes. We don't have any issues at 10 minutes because, of course, these tags tell us as these sharks live. We haven't had any issues at 10 minutes. We haven't gone beyond that. So we might have 3 or 4 things we want to get done. If we have 2 and we're at 8 minutes, we're going to say, okay, we're getting these 2, wrap it up, and let's get the shark back out. We can also do that with sharks in captivity. We're doing some projects with Rhode Island DEM at their Jamestown lab. We take dogfish sharks out of the water there. They're swimming around. Small version of all this, because those sharks are average of 2.5 footers. Same deal. We time it. Those, it's 5, about 5 minutes, and we want them back in the water. So here's where we're tagging up here on the right. And these are different examples, but that's our tag placement. We want it in the upper musculature. And if we're going to apply 2 tags, we'll put one on one side of the dorsal fin and one on the other side of the dorsal fin. We don't want them to interfere with one another. And we just find this is the place where they stay the longest. In other places, they literally will try to rub them off. So here's a PSAT. Here's an example of that one that was, excuse me, this is a spot tag. This is the one that was on the dorsal fin. If you look at it, we tag 3 up where that blue dot is, and you can see this is every time they break the surface of the water, it tells us where they are. This is how we can track them very easily and visually, what they do, where they go. So let's talk about our white shark study. We focused on young of the year, newborns and juveniles. Hard to find, very few have been tagged. And as a result, each one is disproportionately important. As I said earlier, we just tagged our 25th white shark this past week, so we're really excited about that. More tags, more data, more value, answering more questions. These younger sharks are found here. However, the subadults and adults don't stay long, and we're going to show you where they go. Here's Ralph. Give you an example of how quickly these things mature. So when these white sharks are born, mom goes in one direction and the sharks go in the other. That's the end of it. So when they come out, they got to be ready to go. Caught this shark in August last year. Total length is 4 feet. We just started getting data on Ralph. But look at those teeth. And this is a very, very young shark, but already an apex predator in his environment. Smart enough not to go 150 miles out to sea, hang around where he's king of the ocean. Really interesting. This is the very first white shark that we got a detection on our receiver up at the North Light. So we have a receiver there, and we've not gotten the we haven't gotten the detection yet. We're in year 4 now, and this little bugger, we detected him a couple of weeks ago. This was an acoustic tag. Yep, so this was an acoustic tag shark. Really interesting because we haven't had a single shark there, and that's where all the seals are. But this guy is not going after seals. Way too small, way too young. But it's just fun to see that he decided to pay a visit. We don't know if that was one and done. We're going to find out as we pull this data more and more. We see more and more granularity and more fine scale movements, which is what I really get excited about. What are they doing on a continual basis? And if all goes well, we'll track Ralph for 10 years. This is one of those sharks that you saw in the earlier picture in Galilee. Talk a little bit about our acoustic receivers. We've already done that. That's one of my daughters. We're pulling data here at Block Island. Really amazing. Prior to 2019, the state of Rhode Island did not have a single acoustic receiver in the water. Not one. Now we've got more than 40. These are attached to the bottom with a huge weight chain. We deploy them in April and May. We get them out in November. And as we discussed, they listen to everything and everybody's got a unique number. So we go out and pull this data periodically. So here's where all these receivers are. So you can imagine 2018, there were none. And now look at the array. Really awesome. You can see Block Island here. The red is ASI. The blue is Rhode Island DEM. Rhode Island DEM has covered this bay. They call this gating. You see there's multiple receivers. That's to make sure they can catch anything that goes into the bay. It's got an acoustic tag on it. We call it gating. You can see what we've done here. You can see this is the wind farm, right? This is the Southwest Ledge. Fisheries Island, New York, Watch Hill, a couple of spots in between. That's the center wall. You came out on the ferry, you would have seen and that's Scarborough Beach. And you can see how this array keeps growing. Every time we do this, we can see more and more of what's going on. And what's really cool about this is this. We love sharks. We focus on sharks. However, these acoustic tags go in everything. Sea turtles, sturgeon, tuna, striped bass, everything. So we share this data with all of those researchers. So you can imagine how delighted they are because in 2018, Rhode Island, they considered a black hole because anything that swam into Rhode Island, they didn't know what happened to it. They didn't know if it stayed or it went. And now we have all of this fine scale data. This is an expensive thing to keep running because each one of these red dots represents between $4,000 and $5,000 based on the cost of all the components. And then we have to pull them out every year, clean them up, put them back in. And we always tend to lose one, which is a killer. Yeah. Do New York and Connecticut have these acoustic receivers as well in the race? The race is a tough environment, right? Yeah. So the race, for those of you who don't know, this is Fisheries Island. The race is on this end of Fisheries Island, the western end, and it's aptly named. That water races through there. We actually want to start putting some receivers on the backside of Fisheries Island to detect, because we think there's some white shark activity going on there. But I'm not aware of any in the race itself just because of it's such a nasty environment. Trying to keep everything or anything in that is very difficult. But it's a good question, but I hope to expand along this southern side here so we can track movements going that way as well. So what have we detected? So far we've detected 50 different great whites that have come through Rhode Island. We've already detected 10 white sharks in 2023. We just pulled our data. The 10 white sharks were just from our receivers, not from Rhode Island DEM yet. So we're going to have a big year here. In addition, those 10 detections were what we detected up through August 1st. You can see we had 3 in 19, 10 in 20, 14 in 21, and 21 in 2022. We're adding more receivers, so we're getting more detections, which is really cool because now we're starting to see exactly how they move around and what they do. We now have gotten a detection on every single receiver at Block Island. I'm going to tell you the one that was the last holdout. As you can see, that was not the case the first 3 years. We have a white shark, Hev, and she actually tripped our receiver at Crescent Beach in May. It was the first one we've had. So Hev, and I'll show you, she started at Block Island number 5, went to Block Island number 3, and then went to the beach. May 3rd to May 5th, 12.5-foot female. We haven't had one since. Good news. I'm going to show you what that movement looked like in a minute. Then we had our friend Carl trip the Northeast receiver in mid-June. July and August have been our peak months. Good news, no subadult or adult have stayed around Block Island or other recreations in Rhode Island, frankly, for more than a few hours. And of course, as we discussed, we've also detected thousands of other things. So, remember I said our friend Hev, this is Block Island number 5, number 3, and then Hev tripped that receiver and then went to Cape Cod. So we have only had one detection here and one detection here out of 50 white sharks. They are hitting Block Island, and 95% of them go south and then to Cape, and only about 5 or 10% go around the north side. We're not sure why right now. Here's what that movement pattern looks like. Heavy, heavy traffic all south. Very little north right now. The interesting thing is, of course, all of our seals are way up here in the north, which we're going to talk about in a minute. We're going to get into more detail. Before we do that, here's our brub sitting up here. So then you say, okay, well, wait a second. If you don't tag a shark and you can't detect a shark, how else do you know what's going on? Well, what we do is we drop a brub. There's one up here. You can come up later. We drop a brub in the water. Brub is an acronym, as you can see. We put bait here. We attach a camera there, and we drop it to the bottom. And it records for 1 hour. We get 1 hour and 5 minutes. 5 minutes for it to settle, 1 hour of video. When we get that video actually comes back here to Bimmy. Alyssa uploads that data into a shared database, and then we can analyze that data in the fall. This is about determining what is here that we don't and we cannot detect. Really valuable. High definition video, and it gets everything. And it's really kind of fun to watch because it's not disturbed by a human being there. It's just looks like a lobster trap, and we can see all the interaction going on around it. Here's an example. That's a smooth dogfish. And you can see there's a mackerel. There's mackerel in the front. And this is a dogfish. Here's one, there's one, there's one. And they'll come up and you get to see how they act. It's really cool when they first show up because you can see them in the distance and they're using their smell to come up, and you can see them trying to figure out, and they eventually get to the source. So seals. So this is 227 seals at the North Light. And this is something that is fascinating to a lot of us. Vinny is also involved in this. The presence of seals does not mean sharks are present. Does not. And right now we don't have any residents here. Cape Cod's a different story. Each one is only going to spend hours here. Can that change? It certainly can. But we don't know the answer to that. At what density, at what number of seals might we get a resident white shark at Block Island? We do not have one right now. Our detection data tells us that. But we've got a brand new study that Island DEM, Mystic Aquarium, Jimmy, and others, and we're going to try to figure this out. We have such a cool study area, right? Because if you go to the Cape, there are white sharks and there are seals. When did that interaction happen? At what density of seals did a white shark say, I'm not leaving? We don't know. But we know at Block Island, we do not have any of these resident subadult and adult. So it's a perfect place to test, to see. So what do? We have to find out how many seals we have and what's going on. So up until 2018, they mostly spent fall and winter. However, in 2018, they started living year round. Estimates of between 30 and 250 on any given day. You can see sighting and strandeds average less than 10 and now 35. We get more stranded. And this is how we hope to take advantage of that. So we're going to continue to tag the great whites, right? That's going to be the job of the Atlantic Shark Institute. Mystic Aquarium is going to continue to tag the stranded seal. So what happens is when a seal gets stranded, it gets rehabbed at Mystic, right? Then they go to release it. They tag those seals now. A flipper tag has a number on it, but it's not electronic. But they also will put spot tags on it. They literally shave the seal and they put a spot tag on it, and that tells them everywhere that seal is, as you guys now know, every time it's out of the water. What we are going to start doing is we're going to apply acoustic tags to these stranded seals. That acoustic tag is going to attach to the flipper tag. So now we're going to be able to track these seals when they are above the water, but below the water, using our acoustic array. So we're going to be able to track these seals everywhere they go. And we're going to be able to overlay that data with the white shark data that we're getting on where they're. Yes. Yep. So Mystic will put the acoustic tag onto the flipper tag. We're going to expand the acoustic array. So if you remember, we have a receiver somewhere in here. Part of this is going to be an expanded array that's going to be underwater, not on top of the water, so we can get fine scale movements on these seals. And then we're going to be doing population counts for seals, and Val and Bibby are directly involved in this in terms of cameras for 2023, 24, and eventually drones that will allow us to do really accurate counts. So we're really excited about drilling down here and ultimately being able to track the seals, the sharks, hopefully the exact number, and we're going to be able to look at a population count over time. Yeah, so the question was, do we ever catch the seals? We do not. The Atlantic Shark Institute does not touch seals. The Mystic Aquarium is called when there's a stranding. So when there's a problem with a seal is entangled, the seal might be sick. They're called in to get the seal, take it back to Mystic, and rehabilitate it. When they go to release those seals, they have a whole protocol that it's overseen by the Fed that they have permitting for that allows them to tag and do these things so they can track those seals that they have rehabilitated and released. So right now they put the flipper tag on it and they're putting spot tags on it. The acoustic tag would be the new addition here, which would tie into this stuff. So they're already getting data. But no, this is not about going off and capturing a healthy seal and putting a tag on it. Good question. So really excited about this because we might, this is something that a lot of people don't know. We don't know. And this is probably going to answer a couple of questions in hopefully not for quite a while, because if we answer too many too quickly, it might be we have a resident. Yeah, that's a really good question. The question right now we're trying to figure out is, we know at least at 300 seals thereabouts, no one's going to stick around. Sharks are inherently, these large sharks are pretty lazy. You know, they want to burn as few calories as possible. And if there's 50,000 plus seals in Cape, they're going to go there. But we do not know what that number is. We don't know if at 500 one of these sharks swings by to say, go to the Cape and say, you know what am I going to the Cape for? You know, I've got 500 seals here. Is it 1,000? Is it 2,000? We don't know what that is yet. We hope that this will determine that. And the other side is we hope it won't, which is we could have 5,000 seals and we still don't have a resident. Because for some reason they still want to go to the Cape, even though they might have this place all to themselves. Well, they now have an overwintering group, but I think a lot of them are transient. I think they come and go, but there's a core group I understand that are year round now. But the research that we've seen, Rob DiGiovanni, who basically leads that, talks about how he sees these seals they've been able to track at the different islands and different places in the region. Yeah, so the question is, there was a shark here in New Harbor a couple of weeks ago. Did we track that? We did not. That was a short fin mako, and it was a juvenile. But I got videos of it. I got a chance to look at it, which was super cool. And it eventually left the pond because we assume it left the pond because everyone and their brother saw it for about, and every time we got another picture and another video and so forth, and then it just disappeared. So it looks like it may have swam through by the Coast Guard dock, spent some time here, and eventually figured out this is not where it wanted to be and swam back out. But very cool. And mako, there's been one implicated in the attack, and it's so really we don't have much to worry about there, we hope. This is all private funding. We get supporters. People will cut us a check. People will say, hey, we'd like to buy a receiver. People will say we'd like to sponsor a buoy. So for us, we just get people out of the goodness of their hearts. Now, we just introduced a license plate in the state of Rhode Island. We've sold more than 7,000 of those. So we're really excited about that. So that's going to be a significant funding source for us. But yeah, it's different sponsors and people that we interact with and are kind enough to think that there's importance in the ocean environment, and protecting these things. do not know that. I do not know that. No, I mean, if you look back, you can look at the number of seals. They seem to be coming further and further south. You're seeing them in Fisheries Island, the islands, Gardner Island, et cetera. But I frankly, that's not my area of expertise. So we don't know if that's just a competition thing where they say, okay, I need to get away from, because there's so many and there's just so many fish. Or because when you look at the warming water temperatures, it would seem to be a bit of an oddity based on the temperatures they typically like. Yeah, so how do they distinguish male from female with these sharks and saying, hey, a big female is approaching, a big male is approaching? From the angle they're showing you, they don't know. They just know through video. I just did a Shark Week show. I just did a Nat Geo show. Those sharks hang around for a little bit, and you have to look underneath the shark to see if they have claspers or not claspers. And then we're later, would say, and here she comes, a big female. But if you look at a shark straight on or from the top, you can't tell. Good question. Yeah, so the question is, there were 2 shark attacks near Rockaway in New York. Do we have any idea what kind of sharks those were? Technically, no. However, the sand tiger sharks there are there in pretty big numbers. There are some bays there. There are some nurseries there. And we were able to determine that most of those from last year that were implicated were sand tiger sharks. So it wouldn't surprise me. They like that area. A lot of those sharks are younger sharks, so they're learning. They make a mistake. The water is often very turbid. It's not easy to see. And often the good news is, if there's any good news, is no one's ever died from being bitten by a sand tiger shark. The bad news is they're in the top 5 in terms of bites worldwide throughout history. So they are very, they're known to biologists and known to people that understand the risk. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. So we take the buoys out, now it's November, but why do we choose that time? Are the sharks gone? Virtually every species of shark is gone except the white shark and the porbeagle shark. White sharks love the water temperature. They'll tolerate to about 50 degrees. So realistically, they're right on the cusp of saying time to head south. What people don't understand is that most sharks are cold-blooded. And therefore they need to surround themselves in water that they can function in. The white shark actually is one that is not. It can actually raise its body temperature, which is why they can stick around longer than a lot of other species of shark. The problem is they lose a lot of energy heating their body, so they better be eating a lot to offset that energy loss. Eventually they say it's too cold, I got to hit the road, which is why plus the other thing is in the winter, the risk of losing this equipment is very high. That's a seal being released. Just one of the seals are being released in Charleston this past summer. And that's again where we're going to try to tag more of those so we can interact that data into what we're doing. In terms of the help we could use at the Atlantic Shark Institute, research volunteers, we talked about it earlier. We could use boat owners, particularly here at Block Island. Because our BRUVS research is right over here at the Southwest Ledge, and it's easy to come and go and get out there when you're here. I take my boat from Connecticut to come here to then go out and do the research. We have guys coming off of the mainland, out of Galilee, taking their boat out to then go out and do the research. So if we had more boats here on Block Island, it'd be great. But if you own a boat and you're on the mainland and you want to help, we'd love to have you. Thanks, and more thanks. So of course we have Rhode Island DEM, who's our big partner, of course. Connor McManus leads them, and he's critical to us. BIMI, of course, we have Val and Alyssa here that have been doing great work. Jules Cranock is over here. Jules does all of our BRUVS logistics on the island, so he's a critical partner of ours. Kate McConville is here. She's your harbor master. She's been so supportive with her group and everybody that she knows, and the use of the facilities and everything. Just been a champion for us as well. All of our research volunteers. We've got some people here on the island that have been very helpful with this BRUVS research. Katie Cass, Colby Reynolds, Scott Cooper, John Alberts out here on Block Island. He helps with fundraising. Captain Nix is one of our sponsors out here, our big sponsor. Jules, did I miss anybody? Many more. Because it's a good place to spend time. If you've got a skill, we'd love to hear about it. and we'd love to make you part of what we're doing and how you can help us do this research and answer some of these questions. How else can you help? Shark advocate. You know, these sharks, we take too many of them. They take too long to mature. The populations are in some cases decimated. Some of them are in trouble. You've seen the numbers we talked about earlier in terms of the health of this, of our ocean really depends on it. And unfortunately, they just have a stigma, which is terribly unfair, but it is what it is. Purchase the shark plate. Here's our plate. We have examples in the back. They're saying now that it's going to come out in late September. We caught them off guard. We caught ourselves off guard. It took the Boston Bruins 8 or 9 years to get the 600 plates. You have to get the 600 before they'll go to print. Took the Bruins 8 to 9 years. We released it on a Thursday at 8 a.m. Thursday at 6 p.m. we hit 600 plates. So, yeah. And it was a funny discussion with Chuck Hollis at Rhode Island Department of Motor Vehicles. Because Chuck, we hit the number. He said, "Yeah, but you got to be paid for it." No, we hit the number. Yeah, but people had to pay the 42. They paid the 42.50, Chuck. So we went back and forth, and I said, "Can I now give this to you?" And he said, "Absolutely not. We're not ready to handle this volume." So that was passenger. Then we moved to combination. We hit that one, and now we have commercial and motorcycle. But we're not moving beyond those because there's too few plates beyond that. So I answered some questions along the way. Happy to answer a couple more if that's all right. So the question is it true that great white sharks give birth off of Montauk? And if that is the case, does that have a play relative to what's going on between here, Rhode Island, and the Cape? We do not know where great whites give birth. What we do know is that there is a nursery off of Montauk, south of Long Island. We can tell that because there's 3 criteria that have to be met. First, you have to find them, which we have. Secondly, those same sharks need to come back to that area. So you need to know that shark number 12 went south and came back. Second criteria. Third is they have to do it over a period of years. So that criteria has been met. That is absolutely a nursery. And it's where these sharks want to grow up and get good at what they do before they get themselves in trouble with larger sharks and larger predators. We still do not know where these great white sharks give birth. We still don't know, which is why we go back to our uterine tag, right? However, good luck catching a 15-foot pregnant white shark and then putting a tag in its uterus. So that has never happened either. But that's a great question. And that's one of the holy grails of shark research, which is, can we figure out where white sharks give birth? Yeah, wow. So the question is, there was I can tell you the exact weight, a 3,447-pound great white caught here, the largest ever caught on rod and reel by Captain Frank Mundus out of Montauk, New York. And then he harpooned a 4,500-pounder right around the same time. Wow, big sharks, big numbers. How do we explain that? This has always been a hotbed for white sharks offshore, you know? And what's really interesting is, and Frank Mundus was Captain Frank Mundus. He is Quint from Jaws. Peter Benchley fished with Frank Mundus for years in the 60s, early 70s, and then wrote Jaws. And suddenly we had Captain Quint, who was Frank Mundus. We had the Orca, which was, of course, the boat in Jaws, which is really the Cricket 2, which is Frank's boat. And if you saw Frank and you saw his boat, and Frank couldn't extend his arm, polio as a kid, Quint couldn't extend his arm, and Peter Benchley said that it was all fictitious, and therefore Frank had no right to any of it. And my wife will tell you back there that we actually owned the Cricket 2 for 5 years when Frank passed away. So I bought that boat. We were going to use it for a variety of things, and I ended up donating it to Wounded Warriors, and it takes Wounded Warriors out in the Carolinas. So, yeah. So I will tell you this, though. It's interesting. You don't see any white sharks until a whale dies, because you can fish out here your whole life and never see a white shark, ever. And then a whale dies, and you'll have 5 or 6 white sharks on it within 48, 72 hours. So it's a really interesting thing that we still can't get our finger on. But it just might be that these sharks are moving in the, these deeper waters, continental shelf, they detect these sharks and these whales from great distances, and away they go. But this has been a place for very large sharks, and that is still the largest fish ever caught on rod and reel, that Frank Bundas shark. Okay. Okay, any other questions? Oh, we have one there, yeah. Yeah, great question. So the question is, do we have a sense of the number of sharks that have been tagged versus the population that's in the area? So the Cape study said 800 sharks. Greg Scommel and that group has tagged 300 white sharks, but that tagging has taken place over a decade. A lot of those tags don't function. They get lost. The tag will actually die before that. So if you extrapolate it that way, you could say that there might be as many as 25, 35% of these sharks tagged, but we really don't know. And of course, that functionality dies over time. Now we've got 25 white sharks tagged, but they are the juveniles and the young of the year. So we hope we can actually watch them grow through this age class and suddenly find themselves hanging with the big boys, so we can actually see that transaction or transition take place. But I don't know if the tags will last that long. I hope they do, but we're not sure. But yeah, so you could argue there could be as many as 35% tag based on functionality, could be 15 or 20% tag, which, and I will add this, which is why it's interesting. If anybody has the Sharktivity app, right, for Cape Cod, it tells you, hey, a shark just showed up. It's a really great tool, and if you're swimming Cape Cod, get it. You know, that's all I can tell you on that front. But however, if you've just heard that we've got 800 sharks and we've got 300 or less tagged, and of course, how many of those still function, everyone can do math. 1 in 4 might have a tag. So we just know about the ones that are tripping the receiver. We don't know about the 70% that don't have one in it. So you wouldn't use that. And they also caution against that anyway. So they don't ever use this in totality, because if we don't tell you there's a shark, then there's none. And if you hear it, there is one. It's just another tool. All righty. I think that'll do it.
That was phenomenal, and it gets better every year. But I think we have an answer to when we're going to see a great shark explosion on this island. But they're all going to be on cars. Lots of license plates for sure. Thank you so much, John. It gets better every year, and you're learning so much, and we're learning so much. Phenomenal. Next week, we're going to hear all about striped bass from a fellow who grew up in Westerly and fished them all up and down the East Coast. And he's written a book about it with pictures. And that's Bill Sisson. He's editor of the Angler's Journal. So please come for that as well. John, again, thank you so much. Support the Atlantic Shark Institute. Support BIMI. We're all in it together. Thank you.